Hey guys, welcome to today's video. In this video, you're going to learn how to use a RAG with your large language model. So some of you might be curious on what a RAG is, so I'll tell you now. Sometimes what happens is in a large language model, if you ask it a question, in some cases, it gives you a wrong answer very confidently. So this is where a RAG comes in. What your AI model does is that it will connect to an external database and then it will query the database for answers. So in this video, we're going to learn how to build a RAG and then query our RAG using two AI models, one of them being Qwen 3 and the other being Gemma 3. So to build my RAG, I'll be using Google Colab. Now that you know what our RAG is, let's get started. So my first step should be to prepare the data from my RAG. I prepared it using the Gemini large language model. So what I've done is I've given it a little prompt and then I'll copy all of this code and then I'll go back to Colab and then I create a string. So I want to write the string to a file within Google Colab. So I'll go const, let me zoom in for you, const text and then my text. So 3 quotation marks and then I end it like so and then I'll paste in my text and then I write it to a file like so. So with open and then I'll save it within a folder called docs and then I'll call it sane.txt. I'll give it write permissions as file and then I'll simply go file.write and then my text. So now I'll connect to a runtime and then I run my code. So I've mistaken my code for JavaScript code, so I remove this const keyword and then I run it again. I now have another error. It's because I forgot to create my directory. A new folder, I call it docs and then I run it again. So now it's a tick mark, it means it's ran, and then if I expand this folder, I now have my text file. So my second step is to actually prepare my RAG database. So here first I would need to install my dependencies. So I use the capture command and then pip3 install all of my dependencies. So LangChain community, LangChain text splitters, LangChain Huggingface. I'll go to a new line, again pip3 install ChromaDB for my database, small agents, and then to connect my ChromaDB to my LangChain Chroma. And now let's install. Now that my dependencies are now installed, I'll create a new snippet. So I'll create a function def load text. So I want to load my text into memory. So let's give it a variable loader and then directory loader because I want to load all of my text files from my directory. So the first parameter is going to be the name of my directory, so docs. Then there's a second keyword called glob, which is what kind of files I want to include in memory, or specifically what extensions /star.txt. So I want text files, and then my loader class. So what kind of files I want to process. Since I want to process text files, I can simply write text loader. I now have a few errors. This means to fix it, I would have to fix my imports. So in the first line, so from LangChain community, I import directory loader and then text loader. Now what I'll do is I'll load all of my text files in another variable called docs. And then here I'll load it like so. So loader.load. So here my other step should be to split all of my text. I'm doing this because in some situations, maybe if we have a lot of text, then we want to split our text into chunks so that it's easier for our AI model to process the text and our database to save all of the text. So with that being said, I'll now create a variable called text splitter, recursive text splitter. So I want my chunk size. So each chunk should be 500 characters. And I want also some overlap between these chunks to preserve context for our AI model. So chunk overlap, let's give it 50 characters. I need to go back up and then fix my import. So from LangChain text splitters, import recursive character text splitter. I made an error here. I need to change my recursive text splitter to recursive character text splitter. And now to split all of my documents, I can simply go doc_processed. So my processed documents, I'll apply my text splitter like so. So text splitter dot split documents and then my documents, so docs. So I can also print the number of documents that have been produced or the number of chunks have been produced. So print, I use a template literal length of docs processed, chunks have been created. And in the end, I want to return my chunked documents. So return docs_processed. So what I can do here, I can run this code for you. So I run this function. So I run it like so. So it seems like I have an error here. I've made an import error. So I'll go back up, LangChain community dot document loaders. Now if I run it, everything should turn out just fine. Okay, so if I scroll down, notice that I have 8 chunks and all of my chunks are printed out to the console. I'll now create another code snippet to prepare my vector database. So I'll create a new function called create vector store, and then I'll create a new variable called vector db, which is my database. So chroma from documents, and then the documents, and then my first parameter should be the documents themselves. So documents is my chunks. So in this case, chunks should come from a parameter, chunks. I should have an embedding function. So if you're curious what an embedding function means, it means that my embedding function will essentially be responsible to convert these chunks into vector space. In simple words, it will convert these chunks or these words into numbers so that it's easier for the computer to process all this information. So I'll go back up and then I'll create my embedding function. It's very simple. So embeddings and then Huggingface Embeddings. So I want my model name, and then I use a sentence transformer. So sentence transformers / all -mpnet -base -v2. And then we have model keyword arguments as well. So I want my embeddings to be created on the CPU. So I'll just do CPU. Now I'll pass in my embeddings to the embedding parameter and then the directory of my database. So per se directory is vector db, and then in the end I want to return this database. So return vector db. I'll go back up to import my stuff from LangChain Huggingface, import Huggingface embeddings from LangChain community.vector stores, import chroma. So now I want to use this function. So first I create my documents. So documents load text. So I load my text from the docs directory and then I run my function. So create vector store. My parameter should be the chunks. In this case, it's docs. And then we run it. So in some cases, it takes a lot of time. This is because it's being done on the CPU. If you want, you can change the runtime to GPU. It will make it faster. But since I've run out of GPU time on Google Colab, I'll use the CPU in this case. Now my vector database has been created. I go to my file explorer. As you can see, I now have a vector DB folder. I'll now create another code snippet. Here, what I want to do is I want to install Ollama. I'm doing this because I want my RAG to be used by an AI model. So to install AI models on your computer, this is where I would use Ollama. So to install Ollama, curl, actually, you know what? I'll go to the Ollama website and then copy the code snippet. So ollama.com, I go to download, and then I copy, and then I go back to my Colab instance, save to curl, and then I'll create another code snippet. Capture. So I want to start my Ollama server. So import subprocess, import time, subprocess.p open. So I want to run a command. I want to run Ollama serve, and then I want to wait for a few moments. So time.sleep. I'll then create another code snippet to install my Gemma and Qwen models. So Ollama pull Gemma 3 1 billion and Ollama pull Qwen 3. I'll use 0.6 billion parameter model. And then in the end, to check if all of my models have been pulled, I do Ollama list. And now let's run this code like so. And then I go here. Whoops, there seems to be like an error. So I need to check what's wrong. There's an SSL error. Let's try again. Okay, now it seems to be running just fine. Then I'll run it like so, and then we wait for all of our code to execute. So now that I've pulled all of my models, I would now need to create a model file for each of these models. I'm doing this because I want to modify the behavior of these downloaded models a little bit. So I'll create a new file. So for the model file of my Gemma model, I'll do Gemma-model file. I'll double click it. And now I need to find a model file for this model. So on Google, I'll search Gemma 3 model file. On GitHub, there's this issue. If I scroll down, there's a little template that has been given. So I'll copy it like so. I'll go back and then I'll paste it. But we're not done yet. So going back to my GitHub issue, scroll down more. So this is what we need. We need tool support. So if we don't know what tools is, tools are basically external functions that our AI can use. It can be web search or it can be an external database, but in our case, it's a RAG. So I'll copy it like so. I'll go back. Here is what I want to replace, and then I paste. Scrolling up, there are more parameters I want to tweak. I found this Reddit thread of these parameters, so I'll copy it for my Gemma model, go back, and then I'll paste it here. So now I need to fix my syntax. Parameter, and then once again parameter here, once again parameter here as well, and then I remove these equal marks, and I remove this redundant parameter. That's it. Let's create another model file for my Qwen 3 model. So new file, let's call it Qwen model file. Now let's go back to Google to find our model file. So Qwen 2 model file. So I found this documentation. It's for Qwen 2.5, but I used it before and it seems to be more or less the same. So I'll just copy all of this code. I'll go back. Within Qwen model file, I paste all of my code and then I double check. So now that my code has been pasted, I would now need to change some of the stuff. So in this case, I would need to change my base model. So in this case, I'll do Qwen 3 colon 0.6 billion. I'll go back to Gemma and do the same. So from Gemma 3 colon 1 billion. Now I would need to customize my model according to this model file. To do so, I do Ollama create Gemma 3-1b. So the name of my model and then the path to my model file. So -f Gemma -model file. And then I'll do the same for Qwen. So Ollama create Qwen 3-0.6 billion -f Qwen model file. Then I run it. So now it's complete. I'll go to the terminal and do Ollama list. I'll extend it like so. So as you can see, my models have now been built. I'll now create a code snippet. It's now time for my AI models to interact with my RAG. So here, my first step should be to declare a couple of variables. So reasoning model ID should be Gemma 3-1 billion. So the name of my model. I'll do the same for my tool model. So this will be the model that interacts with my tools. So tool model ID Qwen 3-0.6 billion. Now I want to create a function that returns these models. So def get model ID. Then I return it like so. So return open AI server model. So I want to return my model. The first parameter should be the model ID. And then my second parameter should be the API URL, so API base. So normally Ollama runs at localhost, so HTTP localhost at port 11434/v1, and then my API key. Since it's local, I'll just do Ollama. So now I'll use this function to actually get my model. So reasoning model should be get model and then the name of my model. So in this case, it's reasoning model ID. I would first need to fix my imports. So at the start, I go from small agents, I import OpenAI server model, and I'll get the model for my tool model. So tool model, get model, and then my model ID. So tool model ID. When that's done, I want to run my reasoner. So reasoner code agent. So this will be the agent that will perform reasoning. My first parameter should be the tools. So I don't want any tools for my reasoning model, and then my model itself. So reasoning model. So add base tools. So what tools you want by default. I don't want any of those tools, so I'll set it to false. And then I'll set my max step. So the steps needed for this AI model, I'll set it to 2. You can set it to anything you want, but I'll set it to 2. And now go back to fix my imports. I need to give myself some space, so I close this. Here I'll import code agent. And now I want to bring in my vector DB, or I want to bring in my RAG. So vector DB, chroma, and then my directory. So persist directory, vector DB, the name of my vector DB folder. So it's vector_DB. And then I want my embeddings as well. So embedding function, I should go back up and then create another embedding function. Embeddings, Huggingface Embeddings. And then once again, my model name and everything. I'll just copy it from above. So I scroll up, then I copy it like so. Here I paste. And then I pass in my embedding function. So now what will happen is vector DB will convert the user's query into vector space using my embedding function, and then compare that user query to the data stored in my vector DB folder. So now I'll run this code. Now that I've run my code, I have a little warning. I need to fix it. This is mostly because I set my imports wrongly. So I'll go back up. I'll do from langchain_chroma import chroma, and then from langchain_huggingface I import Huggingface embedding. Let's run it again, and hopefully we don't get any warning. Cool, now that it has been run, I don't have a warning anymore. Let's create another code snippet. So in this code snippet, I'll now create a function that will interact with my RAG. So I'll use a decorator called tool, and then I'll create my function. So def run query, user query of type string, which will return a string. I'm doing type annotations here. This is because some of the libraries don't run properly unless I have type safety. So I return my document. So docs vector db dot similarity search. So I want vector db to search for my documents that are similar to the user query, and then the number of items I want to retrieve. So I'll just set k as 3 and then my context. So recall that my documents were chunked. So I would need to join them. So I'll join them like so, /n dot join, and then my documents, so doc dot page content for doc in docs. So now that my similar documents that were chunked have been joined, I now create a prompt. So prompt, I use a template literal, so I have 3 apostrophes. So I go based on the context, answer the user's query. If there is no info, give your answer a better query to perform a RAG will. Then I pass in my context like so. So context, here is my context, and then my question, which is the user's query, the user query, and then the answer. And then I end the string like so. So in this prompt, what I'm telling my model is that I want to look at my context as well as the user query and then give an answer. But sometimes the user query is a bit vague. So what my reasoning model will do is that it will reformulate the user's query so that the results can be a bit more accurate. So then I get my response. So response is reasoner.run. So my reasoning model will run this prompt. And in case I want my conversation history to be remembered by this model, I'll say reset to false. In the end, I return my response. So let's fix my imports. So tool should be import. So it's not import, it should be from small agents. I import tool. Now I want to call my Qwen agent, which will be responsible for tool calling. So primary agent, tool calling agent. I'll call my tools. So my tool function, in this case, it's run query. So I'll pass run query, and then my model. My model should be the tool model. Once again, I do not want base tool, so add base tools should be false, and I'll set my max steps again to 3. I'll fix my import once again. So I'll go back up, tool calling agent. When that's done, let's now test it out. So primary agent dot run. Let's ask it a question. So I'll say how old is Hussein, and then let's run it. So I have an error here. It wants doc strings for my function. So I create a doc string like so, 3 quotation marks, and then an explanation for my function. So this function will ask the AI to answer the user's query using the RAG, and then my argument. So arg user query, the user's query. Let's run it again. Now it's running for a bit. Let's see if the answer is correct. Okay, so coming back to my code, my processing was a bit slow. So what I've done is I've changed the run type to my GPU, and scrolling down, as you can see, my final answer, it says that I'm 23 years old, which is pretty much correct. We can even create a little UI for our code model. So I'll do radio UI, and then I can pass in my primary agent dot launch. Now I would need to import radio UI from small agents, import radio UI, then I run it. So now my UI has been built. You can simply go how old is Hussein. Let's see if it's working. Then I submit. Okay, and let's ask it another question. Where was he born? So according to my RAG, this answer is pretty much correct. Let's ask it one more question. Is he wealthy? Let's wait for its answer. Okay, so as you can see, it gave me a final answer. It knows that I'm a millionaire apparently, and it has given me basically the correct answer. And what's interesting to me is that if you scroll down, you can see basically all of the steps and all of the previous conversations that I've done with my model. So that's it for today. In this video, you learned how to build a RAG and then connect it with your Qwen and Gemma 3 models. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. Till then, bye bye.